Welcome to Mindset Matters, the show where we dive into all topics surrounding mindset, its importance, how it shapes our lives, the daily actions we take, and how it creates our future possibilities. Mindset Matters brings you stories and experiences from incredible people around the globe and provides the strategies to upgrade your mindset for success. Let's start designing your life from the inside out with your host, Rachel Withers.
Hi there, and welcome to another Mindset Matters. I'm Rachel Withers, and I am all about mindset and really the importance that it plays in all aspects of our lives. So, welcome to Mindset Matters, and we're going to be discussing topics that really do surround how mindset can have such an impact on what we do in our daily lives. Today I have a very special guest with me. I have Anthony Russell with me. Anthony is a former sergeant who actually took his skills he learned in the military and applied them to the work that he does today in changing the way landlording works as he guides new landlords through his property leadership boot camp. After the military, Anthony began investing in rental properties and realised that most landlords were actually doing it wrong. They were focused on really profits, and this led to a poor experience for the tenants. So Anthony has developed a unique tenant first approach to property leadership, which allows him to keep his tenants happy and living in healthy environments. And this really will still secure a solid bottom line. Anthony has a new book out called Leadership for Landlords, in which he highlights his approach, his strategies that he takes to property leadership, and he teaches new landlords his way of land leading. So thank you for joining me today, Anthony. It's really great to have you here on Mindset Matters. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to have you here. So I think what would be great, Anthony, is if you could just start with really sharing a little bit about your professional background and what you did really prior to property landlording and leadership.
Yeah, so once again, thanks for having me. My name's Anthony Russell. I started out in the United States Army as a military police officer, and I served for 5 years on active duty, 1.5 years in the National Guard. And during that time, I learned a whole slew of great leadership tactics that the Army employs to make great leaders. Um, a common stereotype in the military is that leadership is barking orders and, just telling people what to do and saying, you go here and you do that, and that people will just do it. And to some extent, that's true, but that's not really a modern approach to leadership. The Army has figured out that, over the course of years, that if you employ a more empathetic approach to leading your soldiers, that they'll be more likely to do what you're asking, and you'll be more likely to accomplish your goals. So I took some of those skill sets that I learned in the military, and I wanted to employ them in the civilian world with whatever I ended up doing. And I landed on real estate. I landed on rental real estate, renting properties. So I started researching how landlords were approaching rental properties in the United States and around the world for the most part. And it's always very much a bottom line, profit first focus, which is great for an investment. From the investment side of things, yes, of course, you want your investments to perform. That's why we have them. But what I don't think a lot of landlords realize is that they're not buying just an investment. They're buying a job. They're buying they're buying into the service industry. You as a landlord are a servant to your tenants. And if you're missing that fundamental piece, then your investment is not going to perform over the long run. Sure, you might be able to milk a little bit out of it here or there, but as time goes on, your investment's going to perform worse and worse until tenants don't want to rent it anymore, and you have, a negative rate.
Absolutely. And as we talk about the leadership skills that you gained in the army, can you sort of share a little bit more with the listeners, the viewers, really how you've integrated that into really helping you as a landlord?
Absolutely. So some examples might be, as an Army sergeant, I'm responsible for everything that my soldiers do at all times of the day, regardless if I'm there or not there. Their actions directly reflect upon me, and therefore I'm ultimately responsible for their actions. Uh, so then the question is, okay, well, if I'm responsible all the time, how do I get them to do what I want them to do? And of course, the first thing people say is, oh, you just bark an order at them, and if they don't do it, then you make them do push-ups, and that doesn't really always work. So um, a more modern way to approach the problem is to say, hey, look, I'm responsible for you and for our team. You and we're going to build a relationship. We're going to have good channels of communication between us. When you have problems, you're going to tell me, and I'm going to resolve those problems, or I'm going to make sure that those problems are being resolved in an appropriate manner. And together, we're going to make our team successful, and together we're going to accomplish missions. So that's the mindset that a lot of Army sergeants are taking, a lot of military leaders are taking. And I wanted to apply that to rental property management, because guess what? I'm not going to be there all the time that my tenants are there. I'm not there around the clock looking over their shoulder saying, hey, are you breaking something? Did something wrong? I'm not there to do that. So I need them to act in the best interest of the property on my behalf when I'm not there. So how do you do that? Well, it's through the same method. You build that empathetic relationship with them. You show them that you care about the tenant. You say, when I go to my property, so I make rounds of my properties on a very regular basis. And, I'm not knocking on doors and bothering people, but if I see somebody walking around, I don't go the other way. I don't avoid them. A lot of landlords do. A lot of landlords say, okay, well, every single time I say hi to my tenant, there's the opportunity that they're going to tell me something's wrong. That's how a lot of landlords look at it. Well, guess what? I want them to tell me if something's wrong. I want them to. So I go up to them and I say, hey, how's it going, Schmuckatelli? How are you doing today? Is there anything I can do for you? Is your sink leaking? Are your windows all right? Whatever it is. And this serves a couple purposes. The first purpose is that, one, you're building that relationship with your tenant. You're showing them that you care. You're saying, hey, look, I'm here. I'm invested in your happiness. What can I do to serve you? So that's the first part of it. And that goes a long way, because that's telling them that they can trust you. That's telling them that you care about them and that you're going to do what you can to make their life better. Okay. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that by doing that, I'm uncovering small issues that can become big issues, and I'm uncovering them fast. So maybe the tenant noticed a slight drip coming from their window, or maybe there's a slight drip underneath one of their sinks or from their ceiling or whatever. And to them, it might seem trivial or no big deal, but the reality of it is water damage is a big deal, and no matter where it's coming from, it's a big deal. So if you see a slight drip, I want to be in there. I want to know. I want to see what's going on, because sure, it might be something small. It might just be a nut on something that needs tightened or whatever. But it could be something massive. It could be an indication that the toilet the above this tenant's unit is leaking or something like that, and that we're getting ready for a bigger water damage issue if we don't get it fixed. So that's kind of how I approach all of my properties and my tenants. Is I approach them with that mentality of, if I see them, I want to go up to them. I want to acknowledge them. I want to show them that I'm there for them, and that I'm there for taking care of their needs. And in return, what I get out of that is their respect. I get their trust. If there's issues that arise, they're quick to tell me. They're not afraid to tell me. They know that if they have a problem, that it's not going to immediately come out of their security deposit. things like that. That's these are real fears that tenants have. They think, oh man, my sink is leaking. Should I call my landlord? Is that my problem? What's going to happen? What's the negative outcome of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I think it's very much been in the rental sector that a tenant feels when the landlord comes to visit. It's going to cost a lot of money. There's going to be issues. There's going to be problems, and I think it's such a refreshing way to really be managing rental properties by building that communication up with your tenant and building, as you say, that trust. Then you're building up trust, and also you're gaining mutual respect with one another, which when you gain that is going to make really help the tenant understand to respect the property that they're in as well, because they're going to be respecting you as a landlord. And that, for
Absolutely.
sure, for me, I really think is a wonderful method of handling rental properties. And before we delve that a little bit further, I would just really like to hear, how actually did you get into the landlord business? And when did you sort of really start to uncover what other landlords, what they were doing wrong? How did you really get into the business?
So the reason I went down this path, it really had nothing to do with my love for rental properties or real estate. It was I got out of the military, and one thing the military is, and that it is the stereotype is true, is it's a very controlling environment. You don't really have a lot of say of where you go or what you do. So when I got out, I kind of went the opposite direction, and I wanted full control over my life. And I had a lot of anxiety around letting a company, like a W-2 job, a job you'd work for. I had a lot of anxiety around letting them control my financial future. So very early on, I had nothing. I no job, no income, no nothing. I decided that I was going to build up a financial portfolio that would support me in case I lost my job, so that my life didn't get upended, or that I wouldn't lose my home or whatever if I lost my job. So I started looking at different investment opportunities, and real estate was a great way to go. It had the best margins. I knew that I could successfully lead buildings just because of my personality. I felt like I could. I had the work ethic for it. So that was how I got into it. I started realizing that other landlords had a I don't want to say the wrong approach, but just had a bad approach to it, a negative approach to it, real early, because I started doing my research right away, and jumping into online community forums where a lot of landlords were talking to each other about different problems that they were facing and how they were solving them. And I just saw this vacuum. There's like this vacuum for leadership there. And real estate, with it being such an expensive thing to get into, people are afraid to take chances. You don't see a lot of disruptive technology or disruptive strategies in real estate, because if somebody's going to go pay $200,000, $300,000 for a building, they want to employ a strategy that they know works. So they look at what other people are doing that's working, and they do that. And unfortunately, currently, the strategy that everyone's looking at is, how can I profit the most with doing the least? that's what everyone's focusing on. And that, I guess, works great right up until you have a massive world crisis where now we need to work together, and you end up pitted against each other. COVID was a nightmare for a lot of landlords, because they were just pitted against their tenants. Their tenants couldn't pay. The government wasn't easing up or offering any easement for landlords. The mortgage companies, they still want their checks. So if you didn't have savings, you got wrecked. But we did okay. Our tenants, we didn't lose any tenants. We didn't lose any rent over COVID. Everybody paid. We had a couple tenants that paid a couple days late, but we worked with them. There was no problem with that. We went out of our way to actually address this issue right away. As soon as the shutdown started, I sent emails out to our tenants, and I sent messages out to our tenants, and I said, hey, look, I brought you into this property. I've done the background checks. I know you're a good tenant. I know you're a good person. You're the type of people we want to keep here. We're looking to not lose anybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop doing our enhancements of the properties, like the cosmetic repairs that we can put off. We're going to put those things off and save that cash in case, somebody comes up short, or in case, just to make sure we don't lose anyone. And I think that message resonated well with our tenants. Like I said, we didn't lose anybody. If somebody had to pay late, they told us well in advance that they were going to be late and the reason why, and they did pay on time, on the time that the time that they said. So, I mean, it's not a theory that this strategy, this methodology of approaching this landlording as a service works. It does work. It absolutely works. And I'm hoping that we can spread the word to other landlords and make them into property leaders. That's my goal. I want to make property leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, communication, mutual respect is really coming through with what you're saying here. I think actually explaining that not only from the point of view as a tenant's point of view, you're explaining from a landlord point of view your situation, and so that when you explain as a landlord the situation you're in difficult times such as COVID, it really then will make the tenant, because sometimes landlords have that real with the bad guys kind of approach, but the way you're communicating with the tenants is really turning that round to, we can work together, we can have your property in the condition, as great condition as we can. It might not be quite perfect at the moment because of the COVID situation, but you're really sharing the experience that you're also having, so they can relate to you further. And what I'd really like you to kind of share again, Anthony, is if you could walk through with us your whole thought process to really developing that approach with the tenant through your property leadership. I'd like you to kind of really walk that through so the listeners can really
Absolutely. So I actually just went through this process over the weekend. We were onboarding a new tenant. It starts right as soon as the very first time I meet that person, they get this experience right from the start, because I want to, I want them to know that this is how I do things, and that, this isn't like a line or a sales pitch or whatever. Like, this is who I am. This is how we run our business, and this is what our goals are. So I want to establish that right at the start. Also, like I sent out in that email, to all the tenants, I said, we've gone through the background checks. We've handpicked these people. They're the people that we want to work with. So when I'm leasing an apartment, I need to make sure that they're the right type of person. They have the right mentality, that they are going to work with us, and that they're on board with the team mentality. So when I'm talking to these tenants, I tell them, look, hey, I understand that, that we don't have, the perfect property. It's not brand new floors, brand new appliances, brand new everything in a best neighborhood. I get that. We're not perfect, but we are also by far not the worst. We take care of our units. I make sure to tell them right away that, if you have an issue, if it's an emergency, I don't care if it's 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't care if I'm, in bed sleeping. I will answer my phone. I will be there. We had a tenant last year, and I think I covered this in the book. We had a tenant last year, the year before last. She had we had a strong rainstorm, not unlike what we're having now, and the building that she was in, the flat top roof had blown up a little bit and started letting water in. And we had no idea that the roof was in poor condition. It just, it was a bad thunderstorm. It happens. You're look, if you're looking to get into real estate and you haven't yet, I'm here to tell you the things you least expect happen all the time. there's no way you're going to plan for everything. So this happened. It was unfortunate, but it happened, and it happened at like 3 a.m. And water started blowing in underneath the flat top roof and getting into this tenant's bedroom ceiling, and part of the ceiling fell. And now this is all over the course of like 2 hours. This has happened. The roof has blown up, and part of our ceiling has fallen. It was a lot of rain. She called me at 3 a.m. and I answered, and I had to shake the sleep off. I was like, what just happened? And once I realized what she was telling me, I said, don't worry, I'm on my way. And I was out of bed, dressed, had my tools in the car, and I was on my way out there to assess the situation as soon as I could. It's actually, I'm proud to say that within 72 hours, we had a new ceiling up for her. We had the roof fixed. We had a light fixture put in. I bought her a new mattress, and she was happy. And that's the approach you got to take with rentals. You got to be Johnny on the spot, when problems arise, because, I could have legally, said, okay, well, I'll get it fixed, and just kind of shrug it off to the weekend. Or I could have been like, okay, I'll call a contractor, and the contractor's, 2 weeks out, and she could have had a hole in her ceiling for 2 weeks. Of course I could have done those things, and the laws probably would have let me get away with it, unfortunately, because, it's not a perfect world. Sometimes not every landlord is capable of jumping in the car and going to do that stuff. So, sometimes things are going to get stretched out, but I was proud that we were able to serve her so quickly and to resolve that situation so quickly. And she was thankful for it. And I want to say that the entire repair was maybe $500, and that's including her mattress. Like, her mattress was a couple $100. It was not that big of a deal. So I think that if landlords can take that approach, they'll be much better off.
Absolutely. And I think I wanted to talk to you a little bit about service, but clearly by what you're saying right there, it's that level of service. It's that level of appreciating, actually, that it is a home to the tenant. And I think a landlord can very much forget that when a tenant is in a property, it is their home. Obviously, as a landlord, they don't view it that way. And this is where I think the mindset of a landlord needs to have that, putting themselves in the place of the tenant and understanding that that is their home. That is not an investment for the tenant.
Yes.
And I think that is when you switch your mindset to that, then you're going to really deliver that service. You wouldn't have a hole in your own house for, roof for however many weeks, would you? So why would you do it to somebody else living in their home? And I think
Exactly.
when you switch that, it changes the whole level of service, really. And I'd like to ask you, when it comes, and let's think from a tenant approach, what should a tenant look out for when they're looking for their home? When they're actually on the lookout for a home, what should they be looking for in a landlord?
So there's a lot to unpack there with what to look for in a landlord versus what to look for in a rental. So absolutely, you should be looking and asking questions of future landlords. If you're going into so the first thing you want to look at is, are you dealing with the property owner directly? Are you dealing with a property management company? Who are you answering to as a tenant? Who's going to be ultimately responsible for taking care of you? And if it's a property owner, then ask them, do I get your cell number? What happens if I have an issue? What happens if there's an emergency? Ask if you could, talk to another tenant to see how they treat them. If it's a property management company, it gets a little more difficult. Property management companies, I don't want to say bad things, but I haven't had good experiences with them personally. It's a challenge, and I respect the fact that it's a challenge for property management companies, because they're they're like the focal point. They're the person in the middle, the man in the middle between the tenant who has their concerns and the investor who has their concerns, and those concerns are totally different. So the investor obviously wants a return, and that's all they care about. And the reason I know that's all they care about is because they hired a property management company to handle their rentals and do all the landlord stuff for them. The investor just wants their return, and they want everything else taken care of for them. The tenant, on the other hand, they're paying rent, and as you said, that's their home. They want a place to live, and they want it repaired, and they don't want it leaking, and they want it safe, so and healthy and habitable. Now those things are separate, but they're not totally mutually exclusive. If the tenant isn't happy, they're not going to pay rent, and then the investor's not going to get their money. So these things are coupled to some extent. The problem that property management companies run into is that they have to solve both these problems, and usually, or maybe not usually, but they have to solve both these problems, and not everybody's always on the same page. So there might be something that a tenant sees as an emergency that the investor sees as a cosmetic repair, and the law, maybe doesn't say either way. So what does the property management company do? Are they going to come out of their pocket for the repair, or, how does that happen? So
I think though, by what, and this is what I so like about what you're doing with property rental, is as a management company. I have my own management company myself. I have found that we have been able to kind of fuse what a landlord expects to what a tenant expects by using some of the strategies and the leadership that you have spoken about today so far, and we're going
that's
to
great.
even a little bit further, because when you educate the tenant and you're communicating, you're getting that feedback that you're able to feedback to the landlord and actually explain on a level that the landlord is going to be able to relate to, and get that understanding of where the tenant actually is in the property and what's needed. And I found when I'm communicating with a landlord, if I can explain with the empathy that I have for that tenant, that is actually passed on to the landlord. And I found that has actually brought the gap of a hands-off investment for a landlord. It actually brings that gap together, and they get a far better investment when the tenant's happy.
That's fantastic.
But that is the way it is, isn't it? And I think you I've used the word empathy. I'd really like to understand from your background in the army how you've really used that as a leader to really bring this into what you're doing right now.
So yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are that way. Not all property management companies are built that way. I wish they were. We would have a lot less issues if everyone treated or if everyone approached it that way. But exactly, yeah, you got to have the empathetic approach with your tenants, and be able to build that relationship with them. You have to be able to make that connection. So another example of how building that relationship can be beneficial to landlords. It's that, like I said, I can't always be at my property, and we have multi-unit buildings. So, there's lots of tenants always running around and getting into stuff. Well, something I highlight in my book is, you can have boots on the ground, helping you out. If you build a good relationship with one or two long-term tenants in your building, they're your eyes and ears. They're going to tell you when things are going crazy. If some new tenant is acting out, or if someone's selling drugs on the street corner in your building's a corner lot, and they're selling drugs right there, they're going to tell you. They're going to bring up when there's issues. So being able to build that relationship with tenants is important. And now, when I say building these relationships, I'm not talking about taking them out for beers. You're not gonna You're not going to go have a pint with, one of your one of your tenants. These people need to understand that, you're, you got to keep the relationship professional. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You got to keep it professional. If you can have a good professional working relationship with your tenants, then you'll benefit. You'll see the benefits of it. If you go down the road of being a friend, though, that's a real danger, because you're going to either say things that you're not going to. So every interaction you have with your tenants, you need to understand that could end up in court. Not that your interaction could end up in court, but it could be brought out in court for one reason or another. Maybe you're evicting the tenant, maybe they broke something, you got to take a deposit, they don't agree with you, whatever. Every interaction that you're having with that tenant could be recorded by that tenant, unknown to you. Every text message you send, every phone call you make, everything, every interaction you have with that tenant, you need to understand could be brought up in court, and it could be embarrassing, and it could ruin your case. So you want to keep that professionalism with these tenants. I had a tenant very recently, within the last month or so. I was doing something for them. I was going down and cleaning their basement. I was taking care of the building. I was just doing something, to make it a nicer area for everybody to live. And I sent him a message and I said, hey, look, this is what's happening. I'm going down here. I'm going to be getting all the trash out. I've got people coming to move it away. If you could just do me a favor and mark your things so I don't accidentally throw out something you want, because there's a lot of trash down there. And he was very upset about it. He felt like it was an invasion of his space. And mind you, these are common areas. These are common for the building. Everybody can go down there. So there was nothing down there was, at least to him specifically. So he had some choice words for me. Called me some names. But I remembered, just stay professional, stay cool. And I said, hey, look, you and I, we don't communicate that way. I said, I'm not your best friend. I'm the property owner. I said, I'm just here trying to make sure that the building is taken care of. I said, you need to communicate with me in a professional manner. Otherwise, when your lease expires, I'm not going to renew your lease. You're going to have to find someplace else to go. And he realized right away what he was saying was wrong. And he said he was sorry. And, everything has been smooth since. So, and mind you, this is a tenant that I've had for years, and him and I have never had any issues before. He's always been very cordial with me for the most part. So I was a little taken back that he approached it that way, but we're all human. We all make mistakes. So I just kind of rolled with it and kept going.
Yeah, I think for sure. And that's a clear example of how you've used your skills from the military, keeping cool and professional, and using them in the landlord industry. Could you share another example of the skills that you've learned in the military that have gone over into what you do today?
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of skills that you pick up in the military. Nobody starts out as a leader. Everybody starts out as a follower, and that's intentional because obviously you need to know how to follow before you can lead. I don't think a lot of people these days realize that they just want to jump into manager roles and be at the top of the chain. But the reality of it is you have to learn to follow before you can lead. And something that I've really taken from the military is just that communication channel and that trust. So, if I'm working with my soldiers and in my mind, I can see how we need to move through a building to clear it, or in my mind, I can see how our convoy is going to move down the road. And I can see where the potentials of danger are down the road. How do you convey those things to these soldiers? They're like 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. They don't know, and they don't care. They just want to make a few bucks and see the world. That's what they were promised. So you have to be able to convey these thoughts to these kids and get them to do what you want to do, because if they don't, it can very well be their life or your life or someone else's life that gets taken. And it's challenging. So you have to. The best way that I found to start building this relationship is to take your ego out of things. Your ego is like the number one killer of communication. So just imagine you're a landlord, and you're going to your building, first time you're meeting your tenants, and oh, I'm the landlord and I'm the best and I'm the king and I own the building and you're going to do what I say. Look, that's your ego talking. That's the wrong way to approach it. Don't approach it that way. A better way to approach it is like what I was saying. You go into it as, hey, look, I'm your team member. We're a team. My part of the team, my job on the team is to make sure that, the building is taken care of and that you're happy and that we're getting safe people in here. Your job on the team is to make sure you're telling me when there's problems, to make sure that, you're paying your rent on time, that if you smell gas, you tell me, things like that. If there's another tenant causing issues that you make me aware. I set those guidelines very clear in the beginning, and we do the same thing with soldiers. We set the guidelines and the standards very very early on in the soldier's career. We tell them, look, you're a soldier. Here's your job. Your job is to clean and maintain your weapon. Your job is to stay physically fit. Your job is to know how to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's your job. You're going to focus on those things. Don't worry about the other stuff. The other stuff is my job or somebody else's job. You set those standards early on. And as people deviate from those, because we're all human, you just nudge them back. Hey, don't worry, I got this. I can handle this. You focus on your lane, and the net result in the end is that you end up working together. It's fascinating how well it works, but it starts with taking your ego out of the situation. If you can't take your ego out of the situation, out of your communication, then immediately you're going to get pushback. If you go into a building and you say, well, I'm the boss and I'm the landlord and, you're going to do what I say. If I were a tenant and I got that from somebody, I would say, well, here's my lease and I'm going to do exactly what's in this lease to the letter. And then I'm going to leave and you're not going to get any more of my money and you can find somebody else. That's what I would say. Or I would look for a clause in the lease to break the lease. But if you go in there with the mentality of we're a team, I want to work with you, it's kind of intriguing to people because one, they haven't seen it before. Nobody's doing this kind of stuff, so they're intrigued by the fact that you want to work with them. And two, it should feel like a warm security blanket to them that somebody cares. That you're not some jerk that's just coming in and pushing people around. You're not a bully. So I encourage people to embody the mentality of the property leader. Embody the mentality, get away from landlord. Look, landlord has a lot of negative stereotypes, a lot of negative connotations to go along with it. We want to break away from that mentality. If you're self-managing a property, then you are a property leader. You need to, it's landlording as a service. You're providing a service to these tenants. You're giving them, so they're paying you for a service. You need to provide it. And I think there's a big disconnect there for a lot of people.
Definitely. And if you don't remove that ego, instantly there's that divide there, there's that barrier. And using team, that is going to open up the levels again of communication. And I'd just like to really touch upon and go into your book now a little bit further, your book, Leadership for Landlords. And really, it'd be great if you could give us a quick synopsis of what the book covers. It'd be great to hear that.
So, the book, Leadership for Landlords, it's now available. We have a Kindle version and the hard copy version. And I'm hoping in the next month or so, we'll have an audio version out for it. But the book, it covers how to make that transition from being a landlord to being a property leader. It goes over, it highlights in detail, or it covers in detail what the differences are between somebody that's a poor leader versus a good leader. It provides some examples from my personal life, some experiences that I've had with tenants, some emotional ones, some emotionally taxing ones. I've run into issues with elderly people, and solving them can be challenging. Autistic children and other types of handicaps that we've dealt with. It's not you buy a property and everything is just perfect. You are going to run into these issues. You're going to run into tenants crying in your face. You're going to run into people not paying rent and telling you to pound sand. I've had doors slammed in my face, all types of things. You're going to run into it. It's going to happen. So you need to be able to approach these situations professionally and with a calm head, and try and take. You need to look at your priorities, and the number one priority is making sure everybody is safe and happy in your building, or at least safe in your building, and that the building's taken care of. The profit, that's a couple lines down on the priority list. It really is. But if you take care of people the right way, the profits will follow. And that's generally what the book is about. It's about how to build those relationships with your tenants, some experiences that I've had, how I handled them using these techniques. And and the profit does follow. We have an extraordinarily low vacancy rate, and our eviction rate is, I want to say our eviction rate is less than 1%. Our vacancy rate is around 1-2%. It's extremely low over the last 10 years.
That's fantastic. Who will benefit from reading your book? Who's going to benefit from it?
So I think the person that's going to benefit most is going to be that small time landlord. They have 1 or 2 properties, or you're looking to break into this field and you don't really know which direction to go. If you're a landlord right now and your margins could be better, or you have a high eviction rate or high turnover rate, you're going to benefit from this book. Anybody can benefit from it, really. I mean, no one is not going to not benefit from learning how to communicate better and build relationships with their tenants. It doesn't matter where you are on your path. If you have tenants that are answering to you or to your company, then there's always room for an improvement, I would imagine.
Also, is there any other key takeaways that people can get from this book? You've mentioned, which I think is incredible, look after people and the profits will follow. Is there any other key takeaway that the reader's going to get from your book?
Sure. So you have to be confident about the things that you do. It's very easy to make a decision, especially when the buck stops with you. It's very easy to question your decisions because there's not a lot of sounding boards. You don't have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of. So you think, oh man, this tenant has this issue. Maybe I should handle it this way. Maybe I should handle it that way. You don't know. You got to be confident in your choices. And when you make a choice, you start running with it. But on that same token, though, if you make a choice and you start running with it, and you realize that it was the wrong choice, you can't be afraid to pivot and make a better choice. And those are some takeaways from the book that you're gonna get. There were a couple situations that I highlight in the book where I made a choice. It wasn't the best choice, or it was a bad choice, and I pivoted, and then everything was better because of it. I think the key is you just can't be afraid to make choices. You got to make hard choices sometimes when you're a landlord. A lot of time you got to make hard choices when you're a landlord. It's not easy. You're going to turn people away. When we list apartments, I'm very thankful and I'm very fortunate that we usually have a ton of people that respond to our ads. I think that's in part due to how well we take care of our units, but it's also we live in a very rent-friendly area, so there's lots of tenants out here. But it's difficult. What do you do when you have 20, 30 people come to look at your apartment? You only have one apartment to give them, and they're all of their situations are worthy. Maybe I've had people that I've had to turn away that were homeless because they were homeless moving, and they got a job, they were living in a hotel, they were looking to get back on their feet, they have an apartment, or they're looking at your apartment to do that with, and they have everything. They're perfectly qualified. But then you have 10 other people in the same situation that are also perfectly qualified. What do you do? It's hard, but you gotta be confident in your choices, and you gotta stick with them. And if things do come up, you gotta have the humility to look back and say, okay, I made a choice, I stuck with it. It's obviously it was the wrong choice. So now let's pivot and let's fix it, or make the right choice.
Yeah, choices, making the right, learning. It's all about learning, isn't it? And making choices. What inspired you to write this book? I'd really like to know.
So I really do truly care about taking care of other people. I do enjoy that. That is something I found in the military. When I was overseas in Iraq, um, it was challenging to see people suffer like that. It's challenging to see people without running water, and I've seen, a lot of times like we would go out and visit with the Iraqi police or the Iraqi soldiers, and a lot of them were very kind to us. They'd make us tea and stuff, but when you see them going out to make tea and they're like scooping water out of a puddle in the parking lot to make you tea, I mean, we're talking about they were very impoverished at the time. It was very difficult. So uh, when I got back from overseas, I knew that that was something that meant something to me. Taking care of others, trying to help people lift them out of poverty was something I wanted to do. Um, Focusing on real estate was the way to do that for me at the time, because our mission has always been find buildings that are not being taken care of. The tenants aren't happy, the rent isn't set correctly or whatever, and buy those buildings, fix them up, and keep those tenants happy. That's always been our goal. Every building that we've bought has fallen into that, and everyone has been successful. But now that we're starting to stabilize, it's been 10 years now. We're starting to stabilize. We're not looking to really expand much anymore. I wanted to continue to benefit tenants. I wanted to continue to try and help this industry. So by writing this book, I'm hoping that there's somebody out there right now who's lost as a landlord, um, who doesn't know which direction to go, or they're having conflicts with their tenants because they're not communicating right or whatever. I'm hoping that you pick up this book and that you read it, and that if you have questions, you can reach out to me and ask me. I'll answer any question I get. Um, but I'm hoping that you realize there's a better way to be a landlord. It doesn't have to be about your pocketbook. It doesn't have to be about your bottom line. It's a business. What look at all the businesses that are out there. Um, you never hear some of these companies like we have a painting company called Sherwin-Williams out here. I don't know if you guys have to carry their paint, but we have a paint company out here. They don't talk about how much money they're making from you by buying their paint. They talk about providing the best paint. Same thing with big department stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart. They're not focusing on the bottom line. They're focusing on the customer, and by focusing on the customer, they're providing a better service, which in turn provides a better bottom line for them. Landlording is no different. Owning a property is no different. If you focus on the people and the service, then you will end up with a better bottom line.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers, with our listeners today before we close?
No, just reach out. The community is out there. There's tons of landlord forums you can be a part of. If you hear somebody, um, if you hear somebody saying some nonsense and trying to steer other landlords in the wrong direction, down the wrong path, make sure you speak up. Don't be afraid to say something. Say, hey, look, that's not the ethical or the moral way to do this. You need to make sure your tenants are first. Um, don't be afraid. Have some confidence. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me. Leadershipforlandlords.com. There's a contact form on there. They have all of our Twitter and Instagram and everything. There's a link to the book on there. Um, and if you do have questions and you ask me, I will personally answer them.
Oh, that's so. Is the Leadership for Landlords on your website the place to go to get your book and to reach out for you? Is there anywhere else that the listeners and viewers can get you?
You can find the book on Amazon. We have both the Kindle version and the hard copy on there that you can order. It's available now. But yes, if you want to speak to me directly, you can reach us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. There's an email thing on there, contact form, all types of stuff.
Well, thank you ever so much for joining me, Anthony. It's been fantastic speaking with you, and I just really think that the concept of really, if you give, if you communicate, you will receive back. And that's for any business, any service that you do. the more you give, the more you receive, whether that is in terms of the bottom line, but also the business becomes more rewarding. It becomes an
Absolutely.
experience. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you ever so much, Anthony. It's been
Thanks
great.
so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Mindset Matters. Be sure to visit rachelwithershq.co.uk to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Join us next time for more tips and techniques to achieve the rewards that you deserve. Bye for now.